Okay, the
Go for it.
broadcast is live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I had the pleasure tonight of welcoming Grant and Anthony back to the show. We're not too sure whose platform we're doing it on, but I organised this one, so they made me do the intro. So, Grant, Anthony, how are you, boys?
G'day, g'day.
Look at
G'day.
that. Well
How are you
done.
fellas?
I
Doing
like it.
well.
I think we could make myself a producer here doing this sort of stuff. You beauty.
Mate,
Three amigos.
you almost
Very
you
good.
almost look like you know what you're doing. There you go. That's better.
That's a bit better, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Almost
yeah.
got there.
That's all right.
It's good to
No
see you guys
mistakes,
again.
mate. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. We haven't. I know we haven't spoken this year, have we? Officially on the shows? No.
No, it's been a while. Yeah.
No,
Time
it's
flies when there's plenty of news going on.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
nothing's
well
happened.
overdue.
Yeah,
Nah.
nothing's happened. So look, we tried originally to get Grant on the first show we did, me and Anthony, a couple of weeks back. However, we twisted his arm, and here he is tonight. So we wanted to start talking about the documentary, man, because there was some really interesting stuff that you posted on socials about that. And where's the documentary at? What's the latest on the doco?
Yeah, so I guess for a bit of background for your listeners and viewers, veteran UAP researcher or UFO researcher in Australia, Keith Basterfield, who's really been a great mentor for me in terms of submissions of a lot of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, and I've just diving into a lot of the research that he's done over the years, because he's been an advocate for this topic for many, many, many decades. And I developed a really good relationship with him, and he actually recommended me for. He put my name forward for this documentary that's due to come out soon called Close Encounters Down Under. And so the producers reached out to me and invited me to participate, sit down with them for an interview to talk about really my driving force, which is advocating for the Australian government and Australian Department of Defence to take this topic seriously and explore some of the avenues that I've been pursuing through Freedom of Information Act, as well as engaging my elected representatives, namely Senator Peter Wish Wilson, who's the senator for Tasmania. So I was invited to participate. The interview was a while back now. It was in June, July of last year. And the release date hasn't been confirmed yet for Australia. I understand it's going to air on 7 May at some stage this year. It's already aired for any of your listeners or viewers that are in the UK. If they subscribe to Blaze TV, they can watch it there. And there's 6 episodes, all uniquely different and some really cool subject matter experts. And so I was privileged to provide my perspectives on the deep dive that I've been doing on trying to engage my elected representatives and exercise my right to information by requesting Freedom of Information Act requests. So don't have an air date as of yet.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, look, we'll keep everyone updated through all our platforms, because I think it's an important thing for sure. However, so where is the Wish Wilson thing at? Where do we? Because I know I signed that petition and whatever that we did that a little while ago. When was that?
Yeah, sadly, still Senator Peter Wish Wilson is the only Australian senator that has raised the issue of UFOs, UAP in an Australian context. No other senators have publicly voiced their concern or their support for Senator Wish Wilson's advocacy, which is a bit disappointing. But it's also promising to see that Senator Peter Wish Wilson is still championing the effort and the conversation, trying to advance and elevate the conversation in Australian Parliament. And so on the 15th of February, so what's that? Less than a month ago, there was the Senate estimates hearing where senators basically convene to assess and evaluate taxpayer spending on government projects to see if taxpayer money is being properly utilized and so on. And so he again pressed the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, on had he, Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Chipman, read the ODNI's 2022 annual report on UAP, which he had, and what was being done about UAP in Australian context following the timely events that occurred across the pond, our brothers and sisters in the US. First time in 65 years, NORAD was ordered to shoot down a Chinese spy balloon and 3 unidentified aerial objects. So, yeah, the old balloon gate. So, Senator Wish Wilson didn't really get a ton of valuable information from the Chief of Air Force. So there's, I suspect, quite a few questions on notice that he's going to submit, and there's a follow-up Senate estimates hearing scheduled in May. So I suspect he'll have quite a few more questions at that hearing. But some interesting exchanges in that February Senate estimates, nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, that's good. At least it's moving forward. And what?
So when he has spoken to other senators, has he got any sort of positive feedback from other senators to try and encourage them to sort of back him up on this?
So there have been a few that have. So Katie Gallagher, who's senator for ACT, I believe, or Canberra, she has publicly noted her support for Senator Wish Wilson's efforts, really on in correspondence that a fellow advocate of mine reached out to Katie Gallagher and asked that she take the topic of UAP seriously, and had some questions around, well, what is the Australian Department of Defence doing about UAP? And Senator Katie Gallagher rightly and kindly escalated that inquiry that she received from her constituent, and that got escalated to the Minister for Defence and Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, and so that individual received a response from the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Defence Richard Marles, on UAP, and that's been, I guess, the highest level of correspondence that a member of the general public or an Australian taxpayer has received to date on UAP. So she is one. There's a few others that I have reached out to, that again have in email correspondence stated that they support the efforts of Senator Wish Wilson, but they're not prepared to carry the torch alongside him and ask questions. They're happy for him to drive the conversation and effort in Senate estimates.
So
I'll put my feelers out. Sorry, mate. So I'll put my feelers out there to my local senators and that, and I've got nothing back on that. And like, as much as you try and encourage other people to try and do the same thing there, but I sort of feel like it's still a brick wall at this point. Like, no one's interested. No senators want to go and risk their careers to go down a taboo sort of topic. It's quite difficult to try and get across that barrier. So how can we do this with such hard up on this?
Look, I think the consistent persistence is the key. Just keep chiseling away, because it took me a while to engage. Even though Senator Wish Wilson was active on the topic and having a conversation, it took me a while before I was able to have successful ongoing engagement with him. And there are a few others that I've had ongoing correspondence with, but it's not at the same caliber as Senator Wish Wilson. And so I think, sadly, you're right, Anthony. I think there's still this feeling that if they touch the subject, it's political suicide. So I think there's still very much a fear of, an air of stigma around the subject.
So what made Wish Wilson move forward with it? What did you present him with, evidence, or what's made him champion this thing?
It's a good question. So he's a former military man. So he's a former Army. And he first raised this issue on the 27th of October of 2021 at the Senate estimates hearing, where he pressed the then Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, on UAP. And that was less than 6 months. That was only a few months after the ODNI released its preliminary assessment on UAP.
The acknowledgement.
Yeah, so I suspect that his background as a former member of the Australian Defence Force, and the fact that he's a member of the Greens, which is a fairly progressive party, that was a topic that he was interested to pursue and get some, follow the data-driven assessments that our friends across the pond, the US, were making. and find out, well, what is Australia doing about UAP? What is Australia doing to, mitigate the safety of flight risk that UAP clearly pose to military aviators and pilots and personnel in the US. So he had championed this effort long before I had even engaged him, and I was fortunate
Really?
that it was actually because of his engagement on this topic, advancing, elevating the conversation on the topic. It was really just happenstance. The timing was right, because throughout COVID, that's what really got me into
that's
the topic.
That's the rabbit hole you fell in, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of deep dived on the topic, and there was a citizen advocacy and activism event called the Big Phone Home, which we've talked about before, but it was an all day, several days. It's been done over a couple of years. A live stream event where our friends across the pond were encouraging members of the general public to engage their senators and elected representatives in the US. And so I thought, well, why can't we apply that same model and way of thinking in Australia? So, and there weren't many that were keen to kind of advocate for the topic in Australia, members of the public. So I kind of took it upon myself to get off my ass and get in the game and start asking some questions. And since then, thankfully, a lot of other folks have followed suit. So we're starting to get a bit of army of folks that are asking questions and demanding answers.
Well, we need answers, don't we? We should say a special good day to Big B Media and Colleen and Brian, Baz, and Nicolia. No, I've messed that up. Sorry about that. But yeah, those that just contributing in the comments are very good, and I think the comments are sort of reflecting the conversation we're having, which is really good. I mean, the thing is, like, obviously, great show I did with Grant. I've done a few with Anthony. There's a lot of backstory. Anthony's podcast is an excellent resource. Grant's YouTube channel is an excellent resource. However, for those maybe tuning in, and don't give away the documentary, but what cases did they choose? What's one or two cases that they chose to focus on?
So they looked at a few, and so the episode that I'm featured in is very much Victoria focused, so Melbourne and Victoria focused. I believe they touch on Westall. Bill Chalker talks about some of the historical cases that he has been involved in New South Wales. Not having seen any of the actual episodes myself yet, I don't know to what extent, and which cases are covered. I've only seen some of the synopses, but certainly I believe Westall is discussed in the documentary.
Yeah, Westall's probably is the most fascinating one with the most witnesses, isn't it? I mean, you can still go there now and view the paddock, can't you? Yeah.
I actually want to take a trip out there. I still haven't been there yet. I live in Melbourne now, and Westall's only about a 45-minute drive from me. So I'm keen to. I know.
We need a selfie. We need
get off my
selfie,
get out there for a live stream or something. But I think the Grange is still out there, even though it's kind of been developed quite significantly since 1966. But that's for me. That is definitely the most the case that has the most unanswered questions. That is probably the most significant cold case and mass sighting, not just in Australia, but I would say in most of the developed countries of the world. And actually, that's not entirely true, because it's probably on par. It's comparable with that of the Ariel school sighting or the Ariel school case in Zimbabwe, where you had also children, children that witnessed a landing and allegedly beings. And whilst you parallel there with Westall, you obviously had children, up to 100 children witness anomalous objects, something and something potentially land. But to this day, the Royal Australian Air Force, Australian Department of Defence, has never provided an explanation that a satisfactory explanation as to what what can be attributed to the Westall incident. And apparently the Department of Supply did an exhaustive, a comprehensive investigation and report on the Westall incident, but lo and behold, that report has disappeared. It's vanished. So no surprise there.
They always do, don't they? They always do.
Just for an update, now with the Westall area, that they have dedicated a park for the actual encounter itself, which they've got a bit of a UFO theme there. Somewhere, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I'm sure it's a park nearby the actual school. And I know that Shane Ryan, who runs the Facebook page regarding the Westall cases, so people can go and contact him and talk to others regarding the sighting and that. He holds an annual, I'm pretty sure it's annual, but he holds an annual event there for people to go and meet and greet and discuss the topic and whatnot. That's so for those who are unaware and in the area down that way, go and check it out. It should be coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, pretty soon, I think.
So go and check it out.
The reunion event, and for folks that weren't involved in Westall that are keen to just learn more about it. So I would love to get along to that if I can find the time for it.
So Anthony,
unfortunately, we're 2 states away, so I can't get there.
I know. So Anthony, I know you said you messed up your interview, but what did they talk to you about?
Basically, it's just about my own experiences there and what I've sort of been involved with in the whole topic itself. I did a horrible job on it. I'm not going to deny that. So I'm not even sure if I made the cut, to be honest. So
it's all in the editing. Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I hope they made me look good at least.
Yeah.
So honestly, they didn't give me much info in regards to this. All I know is they wanted to interview more people that had genuine sightings and had more evidence to sort of back it up. And unfortunately, from my point of view, I don't think there's much evidence out there that it could really hold as a real, genuine sort of evidence, because it's always just that blinky little light in the sky or out of focus image, which gives no credibility to what these people are trying to explain. Not that I'm trying to discount anyone's experience, but it doesn't help the evidence in that case of what they're trying to describe.
We have to remain objective. We have to remain.
That's
objective.
right.
And I suppose, I know me and Anthony sort of touched on it, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it as well, Grant, because there does seem to be some genuine, like before we get to what didn't happen or did happen in the US a couple of weeks ago, there seems to be an uptick in genuine sightings. Like, I mean, I know on the UFO page, on the Facebook page, there's probably been half a dozen where I've gone, that's interesting, like, whereas look, me and Anthony, we all want it to be UFOs. So do you, man. I know you do too. We all want it to be UFOs, UAPs, man. However, it's not all the time. But there has been some genuine anomalous sightings. Seems to be an uptick, and I wonder whether you think that's a tech thing because of the quality of the phones, or does there seem to be an uptick because or is it a consciousness thing because it's being brought upwards in the zeitgeist, maybe?
Yeah, well, I think it could be a combination of those things. I mean, the sheer fact that we all do have, a pretty powerful device at our fingertips, and we can point up at the sky and take some pretty incredible, video or photographic footage. You didn't have that technology in the 1950s, and when they had, some great still camera photography. The McMinnville photo is one that always stands out for me. So the fact that we have that technology at our fingertips, it makes sense that the more phones that are on the planet, the more photographic and video footage you're going to have of objects in the sky. What those objects are, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? That we want an answer to. It could be noise, flight traffic. It could be balloons. Could be atmospheric phenomena. It could be stars, could be Venus, but it also could be anomalous activity as well. So, unfortunately, though, as good as the iPhone and Android phones are these days, they're not very good in low-level light, and so you're obviously not going to ever be able to get high fidelity, high resolution, imagery. So, more often than not, when and I've heard this repeated to me a number of times, if you do see something, it's important that you try and take mental note or even write down as much information about not just what you saw with your own eyes or even on your on camera on your phone, but the weather conditions, description of the time, description of the locale. Get on a flight radar tracker and yourself. There's plenty of free ones out there, and you can actually search to see what general aviation or commercial or military traffic is in the area at that time. So there's a lot of things that you can do above and beyond just taking some footage on your phone to kind of hopefully get some answers for you as to what you might be looking at.
Yeah, and that's what sort of when they asked me, like, can you give us any sort of personnel that have had an experience there with the evidence? I said, look, there's not much I can really give you, unfortunately, because obviously it's everyone's own opinions on what they want to see or feel they see. And it's like, well, I can't give you anything genuine because there's nothing that's going to be credible enough to go and really say they've seen something that is genuine, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's where the falling point is when documentaries are trying to create something that's on the UFO topic. It's just always something that's, I don't know. It's frustrating on my end of things, but obviously we want.
And look, as exciting as it is to see, footage that gets posted on social media, or there have been people that have reached out to me with footage, and I know Ross is inundated. Ross Coulthard's inundated with people reaching out to him, providing him with footage. But the provenance of what you're capturing is really important. So it's not just about the visual and the audio; it's also about the background of the weather conditions, the geography. How did the footage come to you? If it was provided by someone else, trying to capture as much supporting information around the incident as possible, so that you've got looking at the data in its totality rather than just looking at audio and visual, which is very hard to discern and identify and break down.
Well, look, these days there's nothing. There's nothing they can't replicate or CGI these days. That's the problem. That's the issue.
I mean, look at what you're able to do with Chat GPT and deep fakes now. I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that there's a large percentage of the footage that is out there is either done for a laugh or as a hoax, which unfortunately just adds to the stigma around the topic.
I was going to say, what percentage I wonder is disinformation as well, because I mean, obviously, as the sightings and as I say, as it's rising in the zeitgeist, the curiosity and people wanting to know and stuff like that, how much disinformation is there potentially? I mean, as we've discussed, the Australian government, apart from Senator Wish Wilson's just basically ignoring it, even though we have the same technology in our Super Hornets and the F-35s and stuff like that. And if they are detecting, or Pine Gap's one of the best radar stations on the planet, so you'd imagine that if something was being detected either on the Australian or off the Australian mainland, they would be seeing these anomalous objects. And that probably leads us to your thoughts on the balloon and what did or didn't happen. The balloon was totally not for spying.
My daughter, she's 3 years old, and she loves, I don't know if your kids are into Blippi, but there's a song that Blippi does about colorful balloons, and I couldn't help myself with posting that on Twitter when it just the balloon gate saga was just ridiculous. I mean, as much as the Chinese balloon captured my interest for a couple of minutes while it was in the
floating
news cycle, it was very interesting as to the timing of when they decided to bring it down. I always was asking a question, well, if it was being tracked well before it even entered into continental US airspace, over the continental US on the west coast,
did they let it go?
Why did you let it enter US airspace? Why didn't you bring it down before it even crossed Alaska?
Over the ocean or whatever.
Because I mean, and from what we've heard is that its payload was the equivalent of 3 bus lengths. So who knows what kind of weaponry if the Chinese wanted to be nefarious or have a first strike capability or something. I mean, what's stopping them from putting bioweapons or nukes or whatever they wanted to put on a payload that's 3 busload lengths? So I was puzzled as to why the US Department of Defense allowed the Chinese spy balloon to cross the US and
it's the best distraction in the world. That's why.
Well, that's true. I mean, and there's a lot of things that exactly, but the US Department of Defense would say, well, we didn't bring it down because we wanted to capture intelligence on it as well, all the while allowing it to get potentially high fidelity footage of what's on the ground in the US, and then they brought it down off the East Coast. Why they chose to bring it down off the East Coast? There's a lot of other things happening at the time politically. I mean, you had the Nord Stream bombing incident. You had everything is going on with Pfizer. You've got other things as well. So how much of it is a misdirection? Look this way while we kind of want you to avoid looking over here. That's certainly a possibility. But then you had, in the days thereafter, these 3 unidentified aerial objects, is a new term that we now have to deal with, that were key into a caption.
I saw UFOs early on. I'm like, why are they using UFOs, right? And wasn't it just for? I mean, we've got an episode talking about it, but it was 2 tic tac shaped objects supposedly, and an octagonal shaped object. But now we're being told they're all balloons.
Cylindrical was the word that they used. Cylindrical
they didn't
shaped
say
objects.
Tic Tac. Yeah.
And an octagon shape, and the fact that they only were able to pick these 3 unidentified aerial objects up when they lifted the sensitivity of their radars, and they members of the US DoD stated that, we picked up these things frequently in the years past. Well, why the hell didn't you do anything about it all those years ago when it was picked up during the Trump administration? Why are you only lifting the sensitivity of the radars now? And then we have the claim that these 3 unidentified aerial objects were brought down by the F-22 Raptor and an F-16. F-22 Raptor, by the way, I'm in Melbourne, and they had the Australian International Air Show last weekend. Yeah, man, F-22 Raptor, what an amazing piece of hardware. So, but we're to believe that these 3 unidentified aerial objects, which were never definitively confirmed as balloons or science project, weather balloons or hobbyist balloons. I mean, it's the
wording they used later on when they were trying to diffuse it was benign. They were benign objects, right? Which is interesting terminology as well.
Benign enough to still be a safety of flight risk that they deemed it necessary to bring them down. So
yeah, they actually let fighter planes loose in the US.
Exactly. Again, first time in 65 years that NORAD's been ordered to bring down, use force, deploy weapons to bring down, and still to this very day we don't know. We have no evidence as to what these 3 objects were. I mean, they were very quick to release a photo of the Chinese spy balloon from the U-2 spy plane, but we still haven't seen any evidence as to what these 3 identified objects, aerial objects, are. And they're saying that they have not been able to retrieve any of the debris. What a total embarrassment for the US Department of Defense, the strongest military power in the world with the greatest toys, and the incredible F-22 Raptor that brought 2 of these 3 unidentified aerial objects down. And we're to believe that they can't retrieve any of the debris, and they can't release any evidence as to what these objects are. Give me a break. Come on.
Yeah, well, I saw through the social media that there's a few people that claim that they were their balloons for projects or whatever. So whether they are true or not,
came out and said that they're hobby balloons. Yeah, we're missing our $12 hobby balloon.
Yeah, look, and quite possibly there's a prosaic explanation, but if it's if it's as prosaic as the President Biden and the U.S. Department of Defense is claiming it is, then show us. Then what's the harm in show us so we can put it to bed. I'm not just going to trust the U.S. government blindly and we'll have blind faith and accept what they're saying is correct. I always agree with the mantra trust but verify. Okay, you've told me this, but prove it. Show me that these 3 identified aerial objects were hobbyist balloons or science project weather balloons. I'm not going to, and there could be a number of reasons why they haven't actually released any footage, gun camera footage, radar footage, or I mean, there's got to be some form of visual data that was captured via gun camera footage. I mean, if someone can take a selfie, if they can take a selfie from a U-2 spy plane that gives us high fidelity, high resolution imagery of the Chinese spy balloon, then are we to expect that there's nothing captured for those other 3 objects? Of course there is. They just haven't released it. And the reason why they haven't released it is, one, it could be a massive embarrassment for the US, which I suspect that's they've $450,000 per missile. They've
and
blown.
The first one missed.
They've blown exactly. So that 4 missiles. Well, how many missiles in total? 5 missiles on 4 missiles on on 4 objects, one for the Chinese spy balloon, and then you had it was 5, wasn't
it? It was 5 because the first one missed.
Because they missed they missed the Lake Huron, which is, how do you miss a balloon? I mean, anyway, that's another whole query. So it could be massive embarrassment. The US is happy to release a photo of the Chinese spy balloon because they successfully brought that down. Hooray! And they retrieved the debris, but they're not going to release the evidence of the other 3 objects being balloons because taxpayers just blew over $2 million on state-of-the-art missiles that brought down hobbyist balloons. I mean, give me a break. That's one scenario. The other scenario is, well, if they are hobbyist balloons, then there could be some serious criminal indictments or investigations that there could potentially be prosecution or criminal charges laid on those hobbyist organizations for entering flying objects in FAA regulated airspace, even though there was no flight traffic in that area at the time. That is one plausible explanation, but I'm not
think if that was the case, though, we would have heard about that one, right? If there's, you made us do this, and now rah.
Well, they would, and there would nothing wrong with them saying, look, there's an investigation underway to determine which organizations were. I mean, we still don't know origin. We don't know what they were. We don't know intent. Yeah, we have no information about those 3 objects. We only know information about the Chinese spy balloon, and that's a big worry. I mean, it just screams complete incompetence from the US military. I mean, they're spending trillions of dollars every year to ensure the safety and security of the US population, and they're not even prepared to be transparent and tell the US population what it is that they brought down, because I think they're just terrified of being embarrassed, and the public perception that, geez, we really we overstepped here by bringing down balloons with some state-of-the-art missiles that cost almost $500,000 a pop. So
okay, that's what I also want to know too. Sorry, I just want to know too, like, why waste missiles on balloons that they can clearly identify as balloons? And why just give a quick squirt with the 50 cal? Just put it done. Like, that just seems
they're going to use the argument that artillery shells have to fall somewhere. So they obviously, but they weren't anywhere near general populated areas. Exactly. So that's a very good question. Why did they waste a $450,000 missile?
And where did the missile go, boys? Where did the missile
go? It just keeps going.
Well, there's not just going to be debris of these objects. There's also going to be debris of the missile. If they didn't,
it's not exploding. It's just piercing fabric, supposedly.
No, right? and we led to one of the objects, which was reportedly metallic in nature or structure, that exploded on impact with the missile. That's going to bring down a hail of debris wherever it is. And Ross Coulthard has a contact in Alaska who's apparently very close to where the debris field was reported.
I think I saw that post. He posted some of that on Twitter, didn't he?
Yeah, and it's just this isolated, barren landscape of just ice. And he hasn't seen any helicopters. He's seen no rescue, retrieval teams in the area. So again, these claims are made that they brought down 3 identified aerial objects. Well, prove it. Show us the gun camera footage, or show us some evidence that to confirm what it is you brought down.
Yeah. So even if they did give it a quick squirt there, they would have the evidence of the actual whole entire structure or whatever it is, because the balloon would have helped as a bit of a parachute, as it's fallen down. So like they would have had the entire, whatever these things were attached to the balloon, in its entirety, just about.
So, boys, let's steer away from trying to pretend that it mightn't have been UFOs, and let's pretend that it was. Okay? So we're dealing with 2, we'll just say cylindrical objects. I think the lexicon for us all would probably say, due to the supposed legitimate footage we have seen, we would call them a tic-tac maybe. Okay? And then we've got an octagonal-shaped object that in the very initial reports, right, it's because you got to watch the news cycle now. It cycles itself out, right? But the very initial reports with UFOs, UAOs, they were using this language, okay? So do we think, I mean, yeah, me and Anthony sort of had this chat on the fly, and I've had a bit more time to think about it. And I talked to my mates in the US as well. I've got some US correspondents. We talked about this stuff on 200, episode 200. And yeah, they basically said because of the rescue effort, like, oh no, it was too difficult. There's snow and stuff, and we just couldn't get out there. That was they sort of just blew it off, right? Yeah, the greatest military the world's ever known, and it can't fly a helicopter in the snow. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, Grant. Do you think because we've got some wicked comments in here, like, yeah, Big B Media, you're missing the point. A good podcast, that actually. And yeah, there's some other guys talking about, we know this phenomena has legs and it is real to whatever degree that is. Was this, if you think about, I don't know if you guys follow Brothers of the Serpent, but there's a few guys, Marty Garza, and making predictions about some sort of reveal of tech this year. Is this the start of that? Was that a soft opening to, are we looking at drone tech advance? Have they cracked anti-gravity and we don't know it, and now they're shooting down their own stuff or testing? Because, yes, the Raptor the only plane in the Western arsenal that could even go up against one of these things in any chance is the Raptor, right? Which, I've seen as well, Grant. They're impressive machines. So, what's your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, just a side comment. First, what was interesting to note was actually the press secretary for the White House that volunteered the information at the very, very, very front end of her speech that this was not extraterrestrial. And then you have the general of NORAD, or North Command, come out when was asked a question by Helene Cooper, who was actually one of the journalists responsible for authoring the December 2017 articles co-authored by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. Her question was, can you rule out that these are extraterrestrial in nature? And the general, can't remember his name, said, no, I'm not ruling anything out at this.
Yeah,
at this
that's
juncture.
right. Yeah,
so
yeah, not ruling anything out at this stage.
There's this massive contradiction. The press secretary for the White House, or this woman's come out and said off the bat, don't worry, it's not extraterrestrial. And then you've got the NORAD, general.
The guy that ordered the planes. The guy that ordered the planes to shoot them down doesn't know what they were. Yeah,
exactly. So massive, massive contrast, and it's just unfortunate that the White House press corps and those that are have special access to, the members of the media that have special access to Pentagon press briefings and White House press briefings, they didn't ask the all-important questions. They just asked these very softball questions, and they didn't follow up on it whatsoever. And that's been, I know Ross's gripe is that the media is not exercising 1 ounce of journalistic due diligence because they're so afraid that they're going to have their access revoked. If they ask a hard question, challenging question, they're not going to be permitted back into to cover the breaking stories that come out of the Pentagon and the White House. So there's a real failure on the part of the mainstream media to press the US DOD and the White House on this whole incident and ask important follow-up questions. So it's a real real tragedy that the media has not carried the torch and done their due diligence on the topic. That was a side note to obviously before the point.
One of the fellas there, one of the reporters there too, he asked the question before, he didn't get the question answered, but he quickly snipped in there a question going, would you even tell us if it was ETs? And unfortunately, they were too busy giggling and laughing about the whole ET topic, as they usually do. But his question got missed, and it's like, that's what, a genuine question. Would they tell us?
Would they even
if
tell
they
us,
were ET in that matter?
So what's your thoughts, Grant? Yeah, absolutely. So what's your thoughts, man?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I would love to believe that everything that has happened since December of 2017 has been a slow drip of information to try and desensitize the masses, the general public on this topic. Make it more mainstream for UAP to be in everyday conversation, because everyone still associates UFO with extraterrestrial. So that's why they've rebranded UFO into UAPs, to move away from the stigma that's associated with that that acronym. Would we get some form of disclosure announcement from the president? I would like to hope so. If there is, I mean, what you have to remember is now you have President Biden ordering the establishment of a brand new whole of government interagency office that's going to investigate not just these unidentified aerial objects, these balloon-like entities, but also UAP, because there is a real distrust between the White House and the Pentagon at the moment. The Pentagon's been dragging its heels on its legislative mandate, which is to establish the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, which they have, but it's only got 3 staff, 1 full-time, Sean Kirkpatrick, and 2 part-timers that are pulled away from their full-time day-to-day duties. So the Pentagon is basically giving the US Congress lip service and saying, we're going to do the absolute bare minimum because you've told us we have to, but they're not, I don't believe the Pentagon is taking this topic seriously, because they haven't funded ARO and staffed and resourced ARO appropriately. And I think the White House has now caught wind of that, because according to Ross Coulthardt's sources, you have word of potentially a very senior US naval commander that's come forward and complained to the White House that the Air Force has engaged in some activity that is conduct unbecoming the Air Force, that maybe has done some things that are illegal or potentially criminal activity. And there is this huge distrust between now the White House and the Pentagon. And we know that the Air Force has refused to play ball on this topic for so long, because they were included as a contributor of ODNI's preliminary assessment and 2022 annual report. But most of the data that was included in ODNI's reports, most of those reports of UAP cases came from the Navy. The Air Force has contributed very little to the ODNI's reporting thus far. They're refusing to assist with ARO's efforts and the US Congress to get to the bottom of this issue. And I think the White House has caught wind of that and said, essentially, stuff you Air Force and US DOD, Pentagon, we're going to have now an independent interagency body that's going to get to the bottom of this, whether it be looking at legacy programs that may include crash retrieval efforts, as well as what's going on with these waived, unacknowledged special access programs that go without any US congressional oversight. And there may be trillions of dollars being poured into black budget technology that's being tested on US military aviators and pilots without the knowledge of those US military aviators and pilots to kind of test their top secret technology. And to your question that you asked before, Triffon, I suspect that is a significant part of it, that what is being observed by members of the military aviators and pilots is top secret technology that's being tested. So blue on blue activity being tested to identify vulnerabilities and use it as an opportunity to expose vulnerabilities and an effort to strengthen capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, we've also got the plans that have been released on the TR-3B. I mean, that is a triangular shaped aircraft that looks pretty, you know what I mean, that has been spotted. Triangular aircraft is one of the ones that's been spotted, you know what I mean? And it does seem to have some sort of thruster, potentially anti-gravity technology about it, if they have moved forward to the point, as you say, not necessarily involving us in the program. I mean, I think we looked it up the other night. I think the US has lost $6.3 trillion somewhere, right? I mean, how do you lose $6.3 trillion, right? Is it under the couch? You know what I mean?
Remember Donald Rumsfeld that famously publicly stated that the Pentagon couldn't account for $1 trillion in.
I mean, 2.3. It was 2.3 or 4
ridiculous.
The day before 9/11. Yeah, and then since then it's now 6.3.
It's just ballooned out. And to the point that you just raised about the TR-3B, I mean, look at the Navy patents. Salvatore Paez and the patents of these triangular shaped, craft that have obviously no sign of visible propulsion. Are we to believe that coupled with these sightings of triangular objects and reports of the TR-3B. I mean, it's quite possibly that you have the stealth bomber and the what is it, the B-21. I mean, these new triangular shaped stealth fighters that could easily be misidentified and confused as UAP or UFO. Absolutely. But
look,
the fact that you also have...
I'm an aviation nut. When those big B-2 bombers come over, they look otherworldly, and they don't make a lot of noise either. They don't make a lot of noise, and they disappear because they're so skinny. You watch them, and then gone, right? Because of their radar profile, So it's like, to someone who never wasn't an aviation buff, you could easily say, "What is that?" You know what I mean? Like, what's going on there? But yeah, it's fascinating, man. I mean, where do you stand?
There was a news. I can't remember. I'll see if I can find the. But Lockheed Martin was trying to, has been tasked with developing a new triangular shaped aircraft that is almost produces no sonic boom. So they're wanting to minimize the signature of that aircraft. I can't remember what the project was. I'll look it up and tell you in a sec. But that's enough. I mean, how many of these top secret technologies that are being developed by defense contractors and the aerospace corporations, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans, you've got the Boeings, what top secret technology are they developing and testing in above populated areas just to gauge what the reaction is from the general public? So I'm certain that that's a part of it as well.
But that's also mentioning the well-known, isn't it? But what about the other countries that may have point on this technology, like China or Russia, for example? Like, what have they got? That's another thing. Like, what people are saying these things from other countries, or are they of these companies that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's the here it is. It's the supersonic flight promises to hush the sonic boom. It's the Bell X-1. Oh, hang on. No, sorry. It is...
the Bell X-1 was one of the original.
The original. This new one that's being developed by Lockheed Martin, it's called the X-59, I believe.
X-59.
Anyway, so you've got, you've got all this technology that's being developed, which could easily be misidentified as UFO, UAP.
Yeah, there's also...
intentionally or unintentionally.
We do know that, there was that drone space shuttle looking thing that was in orbit for months and months and months, and they didn't say anything about it. And then it just sort of landed again. Like, what did you collect? And like, oh, I don't know, We were just in the orbit for a long time. I mean, where do you stand on... so you still have... I mean, okay, cool. So now it's secret government tech. Where do you stand? Were they UAPs? Or if that technology is being back engineered, what's your theories on that? I mean, you've obviously looked at this stuff. You've been in the rabbit hole for a little while now. I mean, with this latest thing, because I sort of said to Anthony on the show the other day, and I echoed it on 200, I think it's like either it's a disinformation psyop thing by the US government, right? Or we just accidentally started a war with maybe two interdimensional extraterrestrial races of beings. You know what I mean?
Well, I think if we had, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today. Exactly. But I mean, I do think that it could be all of those things in the respect that... So I've had some conversations, or I should say engagement with members of the Royal Australian Air Force, current and former. Some are of the belief that what we are seeing in the United States is nothing but a ruse, nothing but an illusion designed to misdirect our foreign adversaries. So,
no, we don't know what it is either. Now we're going to send a fleet of super drones into your country.
We'll send all this this top secret technology up there to try and really conflate the issue of UAP, so that Russia and China start investing all of this money into understanding what is it that's that's going on with these UFOs and UAP in the US, and that's not a stretch to believe, because we know that in the decades past that was true with remote viewing and psi and so on, that Russia was investing a ton of money trying to understand remote viewing, because that's what we know that the CIA was exploring and investigating. So I don't subscribe to the notion, though, that it is all a ruse and misdirection in an attempt to distract our foreign adversaries. Look this way while we don't want you to actually look at something else. I think that's part of it, but I think there is. I think the phenomenon is real. There is a there. What it is, though, I really have no idea. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to postulate that it's extraterrestrial in nature, because I mean, I think that the general consensus amongst the scientific community now is based on the sheer volume of stars that are in the sky and the galaxies that surround us, that it is improbable that there is no other intelligent form of life in the universe. I think the Drake equation, we can kind of put that one to bed. Are extraterrestrials visiting planet Earth? Who knows? Possibly, because we only have our current understanding of the laws of physics. We haven't been able to reconcile quantum physics with general and special relativity and all of those sorts of things. I mean, are there other possible explanations as well? Absolutely. I mean, aside from misidentification, hoaxes, it being foreign adversarial technology or our own technology, that when I say our own, the US government is exploiting top secret technology to try and test out vulnerabilities and strengthen capabilities. Outside of those things and extraterrestrial in nature, it certainly could be something that's future human in nature, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, or even crypto-terrestrial, as there's another aspect of it as well. So it's a whole smorgasbord of things that it could be. I don't think it is any one of those things.
No,
I think there's a strong possibility it's a combination of them.
Because I mean, like as you say, the Air Force has North Sentinel Island. G'day, Angus. Are we North Sentinel Island, right? Are we a fishbowl, right? Are we being observed? That's the other theory as well.
Alien ant farm, I say.
Alien ant farm, right? Is this, because if these things are interdimensional, if they are ultra terrestrial, I mean, I was just about to say the Air Force hasn't had a lot of contribution, because according to what we understand, most of these things are seen above water. And what's under the ocean, right? We don't actually really, let's be honest, we don't really know what's underneath the ocean, right? And why are all these Tic Tacs, these, you go to the USOs as well, the undersea, unidentified sea objects as well, right? That these submarines are seeing these weird things as well, where it's like that's going faster than it should be able to go, and then it's gone again, right? And there's all sorts of these things that I've seen over the years as well. I mean, we sort of go here at UTC on the 1% rule, right? So if 1% of all of that is true, then the picture that we understand that is the world that we exist in doesn't exist how we understand that it exists, right? And I think we've got to be able to question everything. I think it's.
I totally agree. I mean, if we are being observed, I mean, what do we do on this planet if there's a wildlife sanctuary or reserve where we're trying to protect the habitat of maybe endangered species? What do? We just let them do their own thing, and we don't interfere with their as natural a habitat as we want them to have. So could we possibly be the animals in the zoo, and they are the zookeepers that are watching from a distance? It's certainly something. Everything's on the table until it's not. So I think you definitely have to consider that as well, that if we have been observed, I say there's a strong chance we've been observed for a very, very long time, just based on you've got Indigenous Australian cave drawings and rock art, and not just Australia, in all cultures,
all over the world, man.
Across the world.
Absolutely.
Going back, I mean, I know that's your.
I was going to say, you're flying into my wheelhouse. Going back, look, who knows how long, to be perfectly honest, right? I mean, tens of thousands, 50,000, 100,000. how long's a piece of string, but there is stories across ancient cultures that reach back as far as we understand, and they're pretty consistent too, the stories. I mean, my next question to you, Grant, is I know, and like, no, we don't give away our sources here, right? Okay, I understand that, but has there been any whispers, any murmurings, or have we retrieved anything here in Australia? Has there been anything like that? Have you heard anything about that, or am I just hoping?
I haven't. No, sadly, I haven't, and I suspect that if there is, if there is. If there has been some form of legacy program or any effort whatsoever to record and report on UAP activity, I strongly suspect it sits within the remit of the intelligence services, who are exempt from FOIA. You cannot submit a Freedom of Information Act request to the likes of ASIO, ASIS, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Australian Geospatial Organisation. All those guys,
all the ones we need to talk to.
Exactly, all the ones that we want the data from, they're exempt. Now that's not necessarily the case in the US. So that's where we're kind of trying to get blood from a stone. But the only ones that, and this is why I've repeated time and time again that it's important for folks like you and us and others that are interested in this topic and have a passion for it and just want greater transparency, that you have to engage your elected representatives on this topic, because it's folks like Senator Peter Whish-Wilson that if you can influence their thinking and their lines of inquiry, then they can go straight to the Australian Department of Defence and the Australian Intelligence Services and ask questions. And their questions get escalated to the top of the pile and they get answered through Senate estimates hearing. FOIA will only take you so far. And in a lot of cases, FOIA is a bit of a pain in the backside. If your request for documentation is a little bit too complex, or you're wanting documents that go back too far into the past, they will hit you with a practical refusal response because it places too much of an administrative burden on the defence FOI team to undertake your.
Right. They don't want. They can't go into the. Can't go into the file. They can't. They don't want to.
No, exactly. To put it in the too hard basket. Exactly. We don't have the resources. It's going to take away from the day-to-day operations and responsibilities. So that's why it's important that we engage our elected representatives, because if they ask questions, they will get a response. They'll get an answer.
So then, Grant, what's the most interesting FOIA document you've had your little fingers on? You got anything you want to share with us, or what's the main?
The one that's been probably the most significant to date, and I've been submitting US FOIA requests as well, but the most significant Australian release was without a doubt the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP. So following the questioning that Senator Whish-Wilson asked of Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfield on the 27th of October of 2021, Mel Hupfield was caught completely off guard by the senator's questioning. He was kind of flummoxed that he was being perplexed. He was being asked questions about UFOs. And because he was caught he was blindsided, the Royal Australian Air Force prepared, as part of a Senate estimates brief, a briefing paper, a Chief of Air Force brief on UAP, so that if he got asked questions again or was pressed by other members of Parliament or senators or members of the media, he would be prepared with some scripting, some talking points on, basically staying true to the strategic narrative of the Royal Australian Air Force. And this document that I secured through FOIA blankly tells us that the Royal Australian Air Force has a very specific strategic narrative, a story that it wants to tell about UAP. That one, UAP is not extraterrestrial in nature. It could be foreign adversarial, it could be atmospheric or other benign phenomena, or it could be human-made technologies. That's the line that the Royal Australian Air Force is pushing, that there's, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. So this document, the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP, I've actually got every single iteration of that document from February of last year through to February of this year. So, and I've tried to see where the document has evolved and changed over time.
I was going to say, where's the wording change? You got to watch the word change.
The only changes, and I dropped this on Twitter the other day. The most recent version of the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP is really just acknowledgement that the Royal Australian Air Force has read the 2022 annual report on UAP from ODNI, and they acknowledge that UAP clearly pose a safety of flight risk, but they went so far to volunteer for our US ally. They're
so
stating
not down here. Right.
No, they're adamant that this is a US issue. This is not an issue that is a problem for Australia and presumably other countries, which we know is total BS, because the Royal Australian Air Force has had as long of a history investigating UFOs, UAP, what they called unusual aerial sightings, UAS, from the 1950s through to mid 1990s. So almost as long as a history investigating UFOs as the US did.
But the other thing is too, boys, we've got to take into the Europeans. The French have a very extensive program. They're very open to the sightings and stuff like that.
France, the French government commissioned a comprehensive report on UFOs back in, I don't know if it was the 90s or early 2000s. You've got the UK, obviously had the Condine report. Australia and the UK sadly are very much aligned with each other, where there's move along, folks, nothing to see here. They're not they're not acknowledging that UAP are an issue, where we know now that it's not just the US that's taking the UAP topic very seriously. It's now also Canada. So the chief scientist for the Canadian government has now commissioned a study on UAP, and that's thanks to the advocacy of a gentleman by the name of Larry Maguire, who's an MP in Canada for the Canadian government. He's been very concerned about what he's hearing from the UAP task force, because the UAP task force briefed the Canadian government and military on UAP in February of 2022, thanks to the great reporting of Daniel Otis. So we know that Canada is now taking the UAP topics very seriously. And that then opens the conversation. Well, if the chief scientist of the Canadian government is now recognizing that UAP deserves some scientific scrutiny and investigation, because NASA has committed to a 9-month study to better understand what further studies can be done on the topic. What's to say that, Senator Wish Wilson and other senators and members of parliament can't ask questions of the CSIRO to say, well, hang on, if Canada's top chief scientist is asking questions about UAP, maybe the CSIRO should be as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say the same thing too. Like, why has this guy taken it so seriously? What's in that report for him to go and really question it? And yet everyone around the world or other countries are saying we don't care. But yet this one guy is like,
I don't know why Australia and the UK and New Zealand, they're 3 of the 5 members of the Five Eyes are sitting on their fat ass and not taking this topic seriously, and I don't understand why.
So, Grant, sorry, Anthony, did you want to go, mate? I was going to.
No, you're right. Go for it. I just agree.
No, look, I totally agree as well. There's no disagreement. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on Corbell are, Grant, Jeremy Corbell, because obviously in the chats here, really appreciate all the comments from Brian, and good to see you, mate, Angus, and but Luis Elizondo was mentioned in the chat. I mean, he's obviously aligned. Well, I don't know if he's aligned with Corbell, but that's the US cohort, right? With Corbell seemed to be at the forefront of releasing information. I mean, what's your thoughts on Corbell and that sort of stuff?
I mean, first and foremost, I was introduced to the first I heard of Jeremy Corbell was through the films that he's released. I think there was he started with Patient 17, and then Hunt for the Skinwalker, and then obviously the Bob Lazar documentary. I think as a filmmaker, I enjoy his documentaries. I mean, being a filmmaker, I think he certainly, like any filmmaker would, adds a bit of creative license to the storytelling aspect. I'm still kind of on the fence on the Bob Lazar issue, but I think there's a lot of credibility behind Bob Lazar's account, and there are obviously folks within the US military that are feeling comfortable enough to entrust Jeremy Corbell and the likes of George Knapp with information that they're not comfortable, going to their, or maybe there is a not a level of comfort, but maybe there is a dissatisfaction that members of the US military, they're so frustrated that their commanders and top brass are doing nothing about the UAP issue, which is a clear safety of flight issue and national security risk, that out of sheer frustration, they're going to the likes of Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and releasing information that is that the Pentagon has actually confirmed as legitimate footage of UAP. Now, for example, the footage of the triangle above the USS Russell and the USS Omaha of the purported to be a transmedium object. Now you have the Mosul orb, the first UAP that's reported in a conflict zone. So there are obviously people within the US military that are feeling comfortable enough to entrust the likes of Jeremy Corbell with their information, which the Pentagon is saying is legitimate. So I think there is value in folks like Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. They're getting people come to them with real intel, actionable intelligence, which then when they're able to release it and they have they have vetted that information, they're releasing it. Now, I think a lot of people give Jeremy Corbell a bit of a rough time. Sure, he's a filmmaker, but you have to take that into account as well. Just like with Luis Elizondo, he comes from a counterintelligence background, so you have to always keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, you got to run the filter through with him. You know what I mean? What's he saying?
When you're hearing what's coming out of his mouth, and that's why I always stay true to the maximum. Trust but verify. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information that comes out of Luis Elizondo that we can verify. We have to take a lot of it on blind faith. But I do applaud the likes of Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon for advancing the conversation the way they have, as much as they
definitely moved it forward for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. On this topic, it's just we're not in a position because they're operating in a data-rich environment, and we don't have enough data to verify a lot of things.
Cross-verify, cross-reference anything that they're saying. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Is that enough of a reason to discredit them altogether? I don't think so. But you just have to keep, you got to wear two hats when you hear from folks, that are counterintelligence, military, the government. You should not just take what the government tells you on blind faith. You should also,
especially after the last few years, don't believe anything they bloody say.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that's why it's so important that you truth to power, and you exercise your right to information, and you ask questions and demand answers. Don't just accept what you've been told on blind faith, because we know where that's gotten us in the past. You have to. For me, I like to sit on the fence on a lot of things and let the data lean me one way or the other. I try to be mindful of my conscious and unconscious bias and let the data just drive my thinking where it goes. And that's why I've said time and time again that my mind is changing constantly on this topic. Whenever I get a new piece of data, and then a couple months later, another piece of data, I'm constantly going back and forth, which I think if you're going to have a skeptical mind, but also have a healthy degree, you're going to have an open mind, but a healthy degree of skepticism. I think that's the best way to be. Digest the information, but let the data lead you, whichever route you want to go, rather than just accepting something on blind faith.
Angus is asking here, does Grant know who's involved with the Orchard production company? I'm not too sure where that's come from, but I don't know if you know what that means.
Is Orchard the one that's behind some historical UAP UFO documentaries? If so, I may have seen.
So yeah.
I don't know anything about Orchard as a production company. The extent of what I know is that their logo pops up at the front end of a couple of documentaries I've seen. So no, I don't know anything about them, I'm afraid.
No, that's fair enough, mate. Anthony, I want to finish with something weird, boys. Considering I'm running this show, so have you got any other nuts and bolts or any other questions or anything you wanted to go with, Anthony, before we start?
Not really. Probably just want to go through a few of the people's comments here. They've asked a few questions there, just try and get them out of the way. So I just want to go throw in Big B Media's comment there, saying, "What are the reasons for the government?" Hang on, I'll read this again because I'm horrible at reading. What are the reasons why the government keeps quiet on UFOs and actual encounters? Would be the different views and religious beliefs, or just plain control? It's just sad to see the lies given to public.
I think we covered that one early on. You know what I mean? I
Not
tried
quite,
to,
because we didn't really bring in religious beliefs to it.
well, that's where I
It-
wanted to go.
why
That's
there was
where I wanted to go. I wanted to go.
Oh,
There,
Josh,
okay?
sorry, man,
I want to
I'm
go
blowing it.
weird. I want to go
Is
weird.
is that question related to the US government, Australian government, or all
Oh,
governments?
I think
Probably all of
Any
them.
government?
probably all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just go there, boys. I mean, if you want to go, well, Grant, if you want to answer that question, but yeah, I want to go. I want to go somewhere weird. So when you're ready to go weird to finish off, you let me know.
Well, to give you to answer that question from the Australian perspective, I think it could be a couple of things. I think that the fact that the Royal Australian Air Force has been invested in this topic historically from the 1950s to the mid 1990s, where they essentially said that in 1996. We, the Royal Australian Air Force, cease investigation, recording and reporting of UAP because we can find no compelling or other scientific reason to further devote resources to the topic. So the fact that they've said in the past that there's nothing burger to this topic, and now there's a push for them to revisit their position on this topic. If they say, okay, we're going to now investigate UAP again, there could potentially be a fear in their mind that there is going to be a perceived what's going to be the public perception that shit, we don't have control of our skies, and the general public is going to know it. So is there
mate? I mean, has that? Look, it's hard to know. I mean, who do we include as the general public, I suppose? But do you think that maybe by now that we're not, I mean, us three here, we're not going to be freaked out if that's what they say, because it'd just confirm all the research we've been doing for years and years and years, right? So do you think the general population's more, because I mean, that's the classic answer. We can't reveal the truth. Everyone will go, right, freak out, right? And look, I suppose a percentage of the population would, because if it is extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, then religion, you know what I mean? There would be an upset in the control mechanisms of the planet for sure. However, do you think the general population could handle that question a bit better now? I mean, it seems to be more and more every day that
I think the younger generations absolutely can. I think the people that are of our age, and I mean, I'm 44, so anyone that is in their teens and a young adult, I think they have grown up in an age where they're flooded with technology, science and technology. That I think there is just a greater level of acceptance by the younger generation on this topic. Certainly, you'll have the old school folks and those that are entrenched in their religious beliefs and religious doctrine that they've been brought up with, that it'll probably rock their foundations significantly. But there'll also be those that it'll only strengthen their beliefs in their faith. So, I do think that that's why maybe there has been this drip feed of information over time to kind of just maybe ready the population for some form of disclosure. I don't know if it would be an actual disclosure event, but something potentially, say, from your findings from the Galileo project. What if they come out with their first report that's due in July of this year and say, we have captured high fidelity, high resolution of an image that is truly anomalous, and we can't attribute it to any terrestrial known technology. So
kudos to Avi Loeb and all those people that have put their their reputations on the line to study this, because they've looked at the data that we do have, and it's like, well, there's X amount of these cases that are truly anomalous. We need to actually have cold hard data, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. So I think that's
yeah, and that's how science should operate, in open source it, collaboration, communication. I think the big problem, if these crash retrieval programs that we're hearing about so frequently, these potential legacy crash retrieval programs that may or may not exist, but based on the totality of what we've heard time and time again, there is certainly a degree of probability that there is some legacy program that has never gotten anywhere potentially. And if you listen to the likes of Eric W. Davis, he said time and time again that because everything is so compartmentalized in these special access programs and waived, unacknowledged special access programs, that scientists don't talk to one another. They're so focused; they operate in these silos.
What do they call that? They call
stovepiped. It's all stovepiped.
Stovepipe.
Scientist A doesn't talk to scientist B because they don't want. They're fearful of these big secrets being leaked. Well, we know that that's BS because look what happened with what was it? The project to develop the atomic bomb. I mean, that was how many scientists did you have in that project? They kept a big secret about that one. So I don't think
the list goes on. SR-71, the F-117. I mean, we're all old enough to remember the F-117 in the 90s looked like a spaceship. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's why I applaud the likes of the Galileo project, the folks at CERN who are responsible for the development of the Large Hadron Collider. I mean, they have thousands of people involved in that endeavor, and it's all open source. It's all about collaboration, community, communication. That's how science should advance, not in these compartmentalized special access programs. Certainly, a lot of things will always need to be compartmentalized to negate leaking and foreign adversaries getting a hold of technology. But the only way that we're ever going to, I believe, move to becoming a true Type 1 civilization is if we get scientists and academia.
We've got to get over ourselves and work together. That's what we've got to do.
Yeah, in this topic, we have to.
Well, across all topics, really. But yeah, this would be good fun.
That's right. I mean, this one that we're passionate about, we have to remove the frickin' ego and get collaboration and other great minds on the topic.
Yeah, but that also argue it all requires funding on their aspect of things, because I'm not going to go paid and do things for free.
Well, what does Avi's quote? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary funding. That's Avi's quote.
What I've been doing, boys, I've just been while Grant's been answering that. We've actually covered most of the questions here. There is a few. Yeah. The people in the comments are trying to steer us towards the weird topic that I want to finish on. I hadn't heard of the Belgian wave. Angus was saying that, it's the orchard is with the Jeremy Corbell documentaries as well, apparently. But he's not sure. But the Belgian wave, I hadn't heard that. Thousands of witnesses in 1989 in Belgium, same year and time as nuclear testing in the Mururoa Atoll and enormous civil unrest. That year is significant for a lot of sightings here in Australia too, that 1989. There are dots to follow with some back research available to us now. So that's interesting, Alana. I appreciate that. I hadn't heard of that one. But I think there is definitely some compartmentalization with it. I mean, unless you wanted to address anything else, I want to ask you boys a question. In reference,
I would say just to that, I was just going to say certainly compartmentalization has to exist. Because there's always going to be core secrets that should remain secret because we don't want foreign adversaries to get hold of them. But you hear this argument made time and time again.
Secret? That's been my thought, right? What if we're all hiding the same secret?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, so nuclear proliferation. We know that Russia has nuclear assets, China has nuclear assets, the US has nuclear. A lot of countries have the capability to end our world with mutual assured destruction, right? Yeah. So if the US is sitting on technology that is this game changer, well then if another adversary has access to that same technology, well then we're no different, we're no better off than where we are now. Everyone has nuclear bombs that can destroy one another. So we're in no different scenario if more than one nation has access to this exotic technology that maybe comes from crash retrieval programs. So I don't buy the argument that everything needs to be at this such a classified core secret level. We're not asking for the blueprints behind UAP. We just want to know.
Have you solved anti-gravity? Have you solved anti-gravity?
We want to know what it is, what its origin is, and maybe what it is, where it's from, and potentially when it's from, if it's not from this time.
Look, I agree with missing the point there, right? What if there are no foreign adversaries? I wonder that as well. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, unfortunately, the overshadowing thing of the last few years is it's quite clear that there is a seems to be a functioning something behind the perceived government. You know what I mean? Like the evidence for
reptilians.
But we talked about the black programs. We talked about the missing money, and that's only the US missing money. Every country's got missing billions or trillions of dollars, right? That a hammer costs $100,000. Like, where's all that money going? What are they actually doing with it? It's interesting. I wonder whether there are adversaries. And there seems to be, the uptick in technology, and I wonder. I mean, looking through the questions, it's we've answered a lot of this stuff where it's like, is it a drip feed? Are we going to get drone tech? I mean, I honestly wonder, boys, that we'll wake up tomorrow and go, oh yeah, we created the Space Force back in 2016. Oh, we built a fleet of ships. Here they are. You know what I mean? Like, just tomorrow we get a fleet of stealth bombers, like has happened a couple of times in the past, right? But they're UAP technology. I mean, you talk, Grant, a lot about crash retrieval. I mean, do you believe in some of the stuff that says that maybe they found some of this stuff in some of these old sites, these ancient ruins of megalithic architecture and stuff like that?
Well, quite possibly. I mean, again, we know that whether you believe him or not. I mean, what has Bob Lazar said, that he's told that he observed 9 crafts in hangars, one of which appeared to be from an old archaeological dig. So if there is,
and that's the story that echoes as well, though, isn't it? That's not the first time we've
heard that time and time again. I mean, look at I mean, if you just follow Roswell, I mean, even before Roswell, you had 1945, you had Trinity. We have purported crash retrievals of objects. What those objects were, we don't have any evidence to definitively say what they were. With the old balloon gate again. So we've come full circle again.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I found funny about it, because that's what Roswell was. No, it's just a weather balloon. Don't worry about it. It's just a weather balloon.
But what do you call them, Trevor? You call them out of place artifacts, don't you? With these weird technologies that keep coming across.
Yeah, well, there's UPART. There's out of place artifacts. There's a new term that's sort of entering the zeitgeist that I like a lot. Which has shifted the research. It's out of place technology, right? So there's, in museums all over the world, there's these interesting pieces that are like, instead of looking at it as some, it's always some religious sacrificial thing, right? But if you step back and look at it as a piece of technology, right? Maybe it's a cog from here, or something from this, or something from that. Maybe it's copied from the technology's gone, but someone found the mold and went, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's make a this or whatever, right? There's the schist disc. I'm actually, you're wandering into future research and podcasts here. I'm actually going to put together some slideshows. I've got some stuff that I'm working on to sort of outline this sort of out of place technology that potentially could be there alongside with the out of place artifacts. I think if we start looking at those two things side by side, and maybe some of the UBSART isn't UBSART, it's not an artifact, maybe it's a piece of technology potentially.
Bit of around.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, the evidence for that is not insubstantial, right? There is a lot there, and it goes back to the stories, boys. You know what I mean? The ancient stories, the angels from heaven in their flying machines, the Nephilim technology, right? The Atlantean technology. I know we're starting to use trigger words here now, but there's not insignificant evidence for that. That something, an advanced civilization did once exist here on this planet a certain period of time ago. However, there's you wanted to put your 2 cents in there, Anthony, or are you right?
Yeah, I'll quickly throw in. So we were talking about like the drip feeding topic, right, and how it all affected the generations previous. So like, obviously religion, backgrounds, or stuff, everyone's going to be blowing their minds over if they were to go and introduce this AET or whatever these things are. Now, I sort of feel like they are sort of preparing us with this new generation, as you mentioned, like, because our kids today are like really into technology. They accept pretty much everything. Media is also sort of honing everyone in on the acceptance of everything. Like we're accepting the gays more. All that sort of topics, like everything, races. They're trying to.
I know what you're
change
trying
the
to say,
agenda
mate. I know what you're trying to say.
Without trying to trigger anything else, because someone's going to go and shoot me. I'm sure of it. But they're
Could
they're
have
trying
worded
to
that
bring
one a
on.
little better, but that's all good, man.
I'm
we
just
still
trying to
love
narrow
you.
it down. They're trying to narrow it down so everyone's all accepting. There's no dividing in a sense.
Yeah.
For making sense.
Yeah.
So
Right.
on this, everything's being accepted with our new generations there. So bringing out this sort of acceptance here, they're going to be accepting to ETs or a newer technology that defies where our understanding is to. So there won't be a big mass hysteria. Everyone will be like, yeah, cool, no worries, all right, yep, that's kind of cool. We accept this now because we're so accepting in this new generation. I know it might be a bit triggering on that sort of term, but that's my two bob about
No, I
before I
think
lose myself.
I hear what you're saying there. I hear what you're saying is that it depends on how deep you want to. Yeah, social engineering. I like that term.
That's it.
It depends on how deep you want to go, right? I mean, if you look at the uptick in Marvel superhero movies, and there's a whole heap of stuff that's the hero stories that it's all space based stuff, right? There's a lot of space stuff, and is that desensitizing us to, are we come back to North Sentinel Island? Are we the alien ant farm? And maybe our overlords are like, well, we need to let these people know because they're going to find out eventually, and they're probably going to be annoyed. So maybe we need to slow drip them into the way. We don't want to start that, Michelle. Let's not start that. I really appreciate the comment, but we're not going to start that today.
That'll trigger something.
Unlocking the code. We'll cover that at some point because it needs to be spoken about. But yeah, I think maybe, right? I think maybe, but there's, when we started talking about, everything needs to be on the table. Okay, so look, I think there's a book behind me that I've brought out on a couple of the live streams. It's an alien book that I've had since I was 12, right? I've been in this rabbit hole for a long time, yeah. Just a bit, yeah. And so I've seen all sides of it, all understandings of it. And, there seems to be, I don't know why it boils down to two sides. That seems to be the human condition, but there's the nuts and bolts side of things, which I mean is pretty much the focus that we've been talking about tonight. Physical craft, crash retrieval, technology, these sorts of things, right? But then there's what's been and there's been more than a few people that have mentioned it in the chat. There's the thought that maybe, and it sort of couples with some of the ancient stories and the occult and the paranormal, the supernatural, right? Are these things interdimensional? Are they time skipping? Are they, is the spiritual, the paranormal, and the UAP, UFO phenomena, is it one and all the same, right? And we don't subscribe. We just collect. We call it here at Unlocking the Code. We collect tiles on the mirror ball, right? We're just trying to collect as many perspectives as we can, not tying ourselves to any perspective. Okay, yeah, layers, Michelle. I like it, right? There's layers to this stuff, and when you do that, you've got to sort of bring into this, Skinwalker Ranch. You mentioned the Skinwalker that Corbell did a documentary on, right? Another place of high UAP, UFO activity, but also supposed sightings of interdimensional light beings and all sorts of weird stuff. And when you start expanding that lens across the planet, there's areas all over the place. And there's a couple of weird places here in Australia that have emitted a similar thing from the indigenous culture point of view. I mean, where do you boys sit with that? I mean, do you think, like you said, you said crypto terrestrial, which I picked up that one. I mean, that's another new one, right? And look, I sit as far as I'm open, a bit like you said, Grant. I'm happy to take in all perspectives and then just see. It seems like it could be a D or the above potentially, which is a little weird and a little scary. But I mean, where do you boys sit with that? The paranormal versus the supernatural versus the UAP versus interdimensional. I mean, is it one and all the same? Because depending on which way you look at it, it could be.
Yeah, look, I think the Skinwalker Ranch fascinates me, but my one gripe with Skinwalker Ranch is that it's a television show, that the History Channel puts out to just kind of keep viewers glued to the screen. And my fear with a show like The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch is that it will become the next what is it, the Curse of Oak Island or whatever that that's into like its 10th season or whatever, and it's a fascinating show. But I think
I'm more talking about the
motivations,
old Skinwalker stuff, not probably the
from the Bigelow days. So I think Brandon Fugel, I think his heart is definitely in the right place. I would love to see another scientific endeavor maybe attack the Skinwalker Ranch side that is very much maybe a data-driven documentary that's not so much History Channel focused. But then you have other places, a ranch that Robert Bigelow owned before, around about the same time as Skinwalker Ranch, Mount Wilson Ranch. And there's a guy, YouTuber I follow, he does some great work, Carl Vibe. He's done some live streams with Chris Lato, Chris Bartell, who used to be associated with Skinwalker Ranch in the Bigelow days. And they're doing some really interesting research and investigation at what's happening at Mount Wilson Ranch. A lot of anomalous activity, different readings on scientific instruments that they're using.
Magnetic field stuff, light spectrum stuff.
Exactly. And there seems to be something, and a consciousness element to it as well. So
absolutely.
I don't put that in the, oh no, that's all BS basket. I think there's definitely something worthy of further investigation and scientific scrutiny behind places like Skinwalker, Mount Wilson, other hotbeds or hot spots on in Australia and around the world that are renowned for anomalous activity. I mean, look at the Min Min lights in Australia. There are things that need to be probably investigated as well.
I had an experience with the Min Mins. Yeah. That was I could tell that story. We've told it before. Do you want me to tell it again? I don't know. Yeah.
It depends on how much time Grant's got before he's got to go.
Really. I'm good. I can stay for as long as you want. But that was
going all night then. All right, we're up.
That's it. Let's break the record. No. So traveling back, for those that hadn't heard it here, traveling back from West, I used to do FIFO out West on the CSVG projects many years ago. And because our boss said that we could basically go home on Sunday, so we're Aussies. We took that to the nth degree, and we left at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning to go home. Right, so we'd go, Friday night, or Saturday night, go and have a sleep, wake up at midnight, jump in the car, and we'd be home with our families for sunrise. Right, and we were traveling from far out west back towards Brisbane, and this light appeared on our left-hand side, probably about 5 k's out, pretty bright. I would describe it as like a train light, right? However, like I'd spent years out in the field at that point, so I knew where the rigs were, I knew where the sites were. Like there was nothing where that light source was coming from. There was nothing there. Okay, we traveled this road every week for years, right? So we know what's there. And this thing, we were doing 110, 130, 40, whatever speed we were doing, right? It kept pace with us for the best part of 15 minutes. Never moved, never dulled, never we're traveling at that speed, and it never went any further away, any closer. It was about 15 or so minutes. And after sort of 10 minutes, my offsider went, "Do you see that?" Like, because it's early in the morning, we'd had a long swing. You know what I mean? It's like you might, who knows, right? And he's like, "Do you see this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. It's been kind of freaking me out." He goes, "Good, because it's freaking me out too." And we sort of became aware of it. And then it was there maybe a minute, 2 minutes, and then it disappeared as quickly as it came. And that's it. That's the story. However, it kept pace with us, never moved as far as we were concerned. And we would have traveled, like I said, 15 minutes, 20, 30 kilometers in that time frame.
Yeah, wow. So do you think it had an awareness of you? You had an awareness of it. Do you think it had an awareness of you?
It seemed it was looking at us. Right, it wasn't like there was a spotlight on the truck. However, it seemed pointed in our direction, and we hadn't seen a car for an hour or two. You know what I mean? Like we were 6 hours out, and we were sort of 2 hours in, and we hadn't seen a car for an hour or two. Like barely seen any car. So, and it wasn't like it was directed on the ute, but it looked like it felt like it was looking at us. Right, It felt like it was directed towards us because we were the only moving thing on the road as far as the eye could see. So Weird experience.
And what have you? What in your mind's eye do you think it was that you were looking at?
I just thought Min light. Right, I just thought it was a version of a Min light. I mean, I spent a long time up in Arnhem Land as a teenager, so I've spent some time with Indigenous in Arnhem Land and these sorts of things. And you hear these stories from these people, and they talk about it matter of factly, Grant. Like it's not like it's just it is what it is. Yeah, the Min lights are out there. What are they? They're Min lights. What are you asking stupid questions for, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're out there, and they will see you every now and again. Just don't, probably. I think the warning was from when I lived up there was don't walk towards them. Just leave them alone. You know what I mean?
I'd love to know if there's been any scientific efforts to try and understand what the Min lights are, if there are some form of unknown phenomena or plasmoid that we don't understand that's under intelligent control.
It's interesting.
As far as what I've looked into, people try and claim it as like a form of swamp gas, where the gas from the I know they're going swamp gas again, but they're trying to claim it as some sort of form of gas.
Long live Alan Hynek, yeah.
But they reckon it's like reflections from the car lights, all sorts of stuff from the gases that surrounding the areas there, or even distant city lights, which I think is a bit absurd in my opinion. But that's about as far as they're trying to claim it as, or like a bit of a weather phenomenon, like hot and cold, sort of creating like as they got haze from the heat coming up from the ground. But yet people are seeing these things that have their own mentality, or not mentality, but like their own will, basically.
Yeah.
So that they will follow you or go in their own directions. Like as if they've got some sort of
sentience, some sort of consciousness,
yes.
or something, something like that. I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, the statute of limitations has passed. We were doing 140 kilometers an hour. So,
we traveled. What's what you were doing?
It was 140. No, it was 140 because the U did sit nice on 140 on cruise control.
Nice.
And that's exactly what happened. But yes, I mean, if you think 15, 20 minutes, that's 30, 40 Ks that we traveled in that time frame. And it didn't move. It didn't shift. It stayed with us, but didn't move any closer, any further away. And I think once we were both aware of it, but once we verbalized the fact that we were aware of it, it didn't hang around much longer after that. Right. So we both sat there in silence for a good 10 minutes and not talking about it. But once we actually talked about it, it was gone very soon after that. So, is that proof, right? The fact that we acknowledged its existence means it knew that we were talking about it, and it left. And it just winked on and winked off, right? It was not. It was nothing. There was no fading or anything else like that. It was just like boom, right? And then stayed exact same place 15, 20 minutes or so, and then winked out again. And yes, you say boon lights down south, right? So there's each tribe, each sect, they have different words for them, but they are, it's a matter of fact thing. They exist. Okay. You talked about, you talked about the crypto stuff, right? So I did a Yowie podcast with a friend of, a good friend of the show last year. And sort of like, I know what Anthony has said to me when we've had discussions about his guests, right? It's that, how do we know that we believe that they believe what they saw, right? This is the thing, because you can get sucked into a story and I had these boys in the studio and I could see the fear in their eyes when they were talking about the experience that they had. They were there. They saw it in their mind. This is what happened to them. And I thought I'd just sort of start putting the feelers out for, Yowie stuff. And it's surprising the amount of people went, oh, yeah. Like, especially a few old cow cockies and stuff that I know, a few old rangers. And they're like, oh, yeah. When we used to drove the horses, from up north, we just used to have to go around this one patch in the forest. And like, why? And they go, oh, no, you don't go in there. Well, what do you mean you don't go in there? Because that's where the Yowies live, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, and it was just, again, matter of fact for these people that have lived on the land here in Australia and look, I've been in the bush, so I spent, best part of 16 years FIFO around Australia and Australasia. There's definite places that I've been to, and even in my field trips for megaliths and hunting stones down, or even just being in the bush camping. There's places that you feel that you don't want to go, right? It's like, or you walk into somewhere, it's like, we need to get out of here right now, right? And there's no real explanation for that. However, we've all had that feeling, right? And is it all related? Did you guys catch Eric Weinstein's podcast on the JRE when he was talking about the physics and all those sorts of things? I think that was very fascinating as well.
Yeah, that was a really great episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. I really enjoy it. I didn't understand everything that Eric Weinstein said because I don't have a physics background, but
you've got
I really I really take time to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah.
It really, if you haven't seen Anthony, it's a really good conversation. You should definitely check it out.
But was that a recent one, or is it?
Yeah, it's a recent one. It's only it's only last
only
week.
A week ago or something.
Yeah, okay, I haven't kept up with most of the podcasts at the moment.
No. When you head back to work, man, put that one on the playlist. That's a good one. You're gonna have to listen to it twice. I think I've listened to it twice already, trying to grasp the concepts. But basically, what he's talking about is that we've spent, I think, they mentioned of CERN, and yes, you feel the heebie-jeebies for sure, Michelle. Yeah, that's what we got, and that was the thing. Once we were both getting the heebie-jeebies.
Hair stands up on your neck.
Yeah. It's like we were both getting the heebie-jeebies. It's like, man, are you seeing this? Right? Because it was starting to freak us out a little bit, and then once we acknowledged that it winked out not long after that. Where was I? What was I talking about? I just lost my train of thought.
I would. It's on my bucket list to have my own UAP sighting. So one of these days, I haven't. I got a few contacts that are proponents of advocates for the CE5. So one day to go out on a little.
We were supposed to do that in Honduras. We were just.
But honestly, we didn't need to. We saw something strange as it was, so we didn't need to.
We saw some interesting stuff up there for sure.
I mean, the same goes for Yowie too. Like I've been a big fan of all things Yowie, Sasquatch, Bigfoot for many, many years. And years ago, when Matt Damon and Ben Affleck had a screenwriting contest called Project Greenlight. You may remember that from back in the day, where your everyday Joe could write a screenplay and submit it to a competition. And if it got selected as the winning screenplay, you would be able to direct a film for $1 million. And I wrote a screenplay on the Yowie, kind of like six friends go to have a weekend away at the Snowy Mountains, where there's been historical lot of Yowie activity.
Yep.
And I just soaked myself up in that topic and did a lot of research. But that's a whole fascinating topic in itself. That
cryptozoology is interesting. Remind me, boys, I've got we went one of the trips we went on last year. We got some interesting footprints that I sent to a mate of mine who's very skeptical. He's like, "Oh yeah, what kind of footprints have you got?" And then I get a message back about half an hour later going, "Have you got any more of this stuff?" And I had like video and stuff, and I sent it all to him. And he's like, "Man, that is interesting." But basically, it's a big cat. It looks like a big, massive cat paw. And the bloke who took the photos had his boot. He had like a size 11 boot next to this, and it was like it was running through the mud. Right, and you could see where it's running through the mud, but it was a massive paw, which was, he's very skeptical, right? Anthony, you and Anthony, him and Anthony would get along really well, right? Because Anthony doesn't believe anything either. He's like, "No, what is that? You've got something there. That's not nothing, right?" So, the layers and the complexities of this. They never end, do they, boys? Right, and we don't have it. I think what the important thing is, and we all try and do this ourselves, is that remain objective. You've got to. Nothing's off the table, right? And the crazier it sounds, well, it's just got to be in the file. Okay, all right. I think that's crazy, but we can't leave it. You can't leave it, right? Because it might be there could be something to cryptozoology or interdimensional technology, different types of physics and understandings and timelines, and who knows, man,
Well, I mean, the Skinwalker Ranch, I mean, you hear about all the anecdotes and the historical stories to come out of that ranch, even pre-NIDS days, where you had, reports of skinwalkers or werewolf activity on the ranch. You've got sighting of these huge bipeded hominid creatures, Bigfoot type kind of creatures. So is there a connection or correlation?
There's also the surrounding ranches and Skinwalker as well. If you start expanding that research pool,
the whole Uinta Basin area,
the whole basin there, right, where it's like you go and rent a property there, and there's like 15 locks on the inside of that door, right? It's like, and that wasn't just one ranch; that was all ranches where they were literally barring themselves inside the house of a night time because of what was going on outside the house. I imagine, and there's, as I say, there's stories like that down under here as well, right? Like I said, I ran into a few old ranchers and cowcockies, and they're like, "Oh yeah." When you go and, like, obviously a straight shot from one farm or one ranch to another is the best part. However, depending on mountain ranges and stuff, however, they would fully divert and have to go around, like divert 15 k's out of the way to go around this one section of forest, like between North Queensland and Western Queensland, in order to miss this patch because no one was brave enough. The horses, the cattle, no one was going to go in there, right? And these are hard men. We're like, oh no, we're not going. No, there's something in there. We're not going in there, right? There's something to this phenomena that does seem to have legs, I think.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing to take from this whole topic, even just paranormal and UFO or anything in that sort of nature. That everything is happening worldwide. There's so much commonality, common ground in the whole topic,
and it gets your imagination running wild as well. I mean, I remember
really
my
fun.
first, it is. It's very. I mean, my first foray into the whole Bigfoot lore was, I mean, the first time I saw the PGF, the Patterson-Gimlin film, to this day has not been formally debunked. I think it's one of the best pieces of visual footage that you have captured on what's purported to be a Bigfoot. And the first time I saw that as a young child, I was just absolutely fascinated. Then when your mind runs wild with the possibilities of when you're out camping or when you're out alone or with a small group bushwalking, your mind can play tricks on you, but it can also be a friend as well as can be a foe as well. So
absolutely.
And that was with a 30, 40-year-old camera too, and yet we have these high definition cameras in our pockets and we still can't get a Bigfoot.
You can't get UFOs either, mate.
They can't even get a UFO.
But I mean, does that? I heard an interesting theory the other day that, again, we don't take any theories away. Where is it an interdimensional? Like, I mean, if there's a UAP that is interdimensional or is what's the multi-facet vehicle? No, I'm missing the thing. How can transmedium vehicle, right? That can create its own space time and all these sorts of things. It's probably going to have just have a little switch on the dash, right? Just hit that switch and no one's going to get a photo of us. You know what I mean?
Like the old Jetsons, just flick a switch and
just flick a switch. No one's going to get a photo of us. Well, I was thinking more like cloak technology or just like distortion technology, so no one gets a clear shot of it. It's so fascinating, boys. We're approaching the 2-hour marks. I mean, where did you boys want to go to finish off? Did you want to talk about anything else, or I'm glad that you fellas are open to that. I was wondering whether you'd be just nuts and bolts, but it's super stoked that you're open to all perspective, because I think we're going to figure out, gents, that it's maybe a D or the above.
I got a little one to throw in for you. This is thanks to one of the listeners here, Jamie, threw in a bit of research for me to go and look into. And I don't know if you've ever heard of tetrachromacy. Now, I'll give you a little run of what that is. It's a condition where a person has 4 cone types in their retina rather than the standard 3 that most people have: red, green, and blue. So they're seeing a different spectrum of colors, which gives them the possible ability to see something of a paranormal nature or of a UFO, something of that sort of aspect. But I looked deeper into it, but it's only common in women. Now, when you look into the history of the whole paranormal and UFO sort of stuff, there's always seems to be common ground where most women are mostly seeing these things. So whether it be because they're, different mindset or, something in that sort of woman's nature, or it could be this tetrachromacy ability that they have that they unknowingly have. And they're seeing these weird things and going, oh, I'm seeing these weird objects, beings, creatures, whatever. So that's to go and throw that in there as a bit of a.
That's interesting. I want to
Research
look
instead.
into that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Can we
very interesting.
send me the word, like what that word is? I want to do a bit of deep diving on that myself.
Tetrachromacy.
Tetrachromacy. Yeah, because look, you know, you're getting into, as amazing as our eyes are, we literally only see 1.8% of the light spectrum or something like that, right? There's like literally 99% of what's going on around us. We've got no idea. We can't see it.
Yep.
So, you know, who knows, man? You know, like we could be coexisting with, you know, depending on where you are on the light spectrum, right? I mean, and then we start messing with physics and gravity and, you know, I mean, gravity's captured my attention the last sort of 12, 18 months, this anti-gravity technology. You know, there's the Bendall motor that theoretically is coming out, which is using, you know, plasmoid generators and, you know, all the thunder generators and these sorts of things, which is using implosion technology as opposed to explosion technology, which is utilizing sacred geometry and vibration and frequency. You know, I mean, there's these things that we need to try and understand. Because, you know, obviously my bread and butter is the megalith stuff, right? I mean, I've already had to grasp these concepts, because how do you take a 1,200-ton stone or a 900-ton stone and put it on top of a hill, right? Without understanding gravity or vibration or frequency or energy, how do you do that? You know, and that's been done multiple times all over the planet. So we got to open our minds to all possibilities. And I think the broader your mind is, the more accepting you can be of whatever it ends up being, I think. You know?
I saw I'm open-minded to things, but yeah, I'm a bit not open to this one. Someone came up with a theory that they floated these things on top of the pyramids. Like, you know, when they're building the pyramids, they floated everything up on top of the pyramid.
Oh, yes,
like,
that's
how can you do that?
Yeah,
so
look,
like massless.
No, like floated, like as in anti-gravity type stuff, or
no, using water. Sorry, I should have said using water.
Actually float as in
yeah. So that's the giant water pump theory is one that is an interesting one. I had interesting guy by the name of Stephen Myers. I had him on the show last year before, I can't remember. He's been on the show to discuss his theories. He's an interesting cat. He's very tied to his theories, I suppose, is the polite way to put it. However, it's not insignificant. You know, you've got to take a few leaps and a few stretches to get to where, how do they supply water and all these sorts of things.
Exactly.
And
just to even get the height.
Yes. And well, this is well, I don't know whether Angus is still listening, but he was actually fixing our water here in Brisbane, listening to us. He's one of our helpers on the show. However, yeah, I mean, he talks about hydrology and stuff like that. That's literally his job. You know, so it's interesting. I mean, we don't know, right? That's the bottom line. I mean, there's the recent discovery in the Great Pyramid that there was a void under the chevrons at the gate. I don't know whether you guys have seen that.
Tunnel.
Yeah. See, and this is interesting. And again, the live listeners and, you know, this show, again, I'm gonna. This is a snapshot. I'm going to make it. I actually want to talk to Angus about it on the next show that we do together. However, I always thought that was the door, right? And it turns out it's not the door. I always thought that those chevrons, because underneath those chevrons in the Great Pyramid, it looks like it's been built in, right? I always thought that if we actually just jimmied that out, you would have an arch, and that would be the official door or entrance to the Great Pyramid. But as you know, looking at that void that they released, and it's technically not, right. And I mean, well, Steve Myers, he put a meme up today. I think he's like, is the void more interesting, or is the stones that are in the void more interesting, right? And I think potentially it's the stones in the void. But we're going to do a bit more of a deeper investigation into that. Yeah, look, it's fascinating. There's levels of tech, and there's levels of understanding, and there's levels of competence in trying to understand these things that go across so many different disciplines. You know, I think the thing is, boys, with this UAP transmedium anti-grav technology, I do think and have always thought that one of the things holding us back in our three-dimensional existence is the fact that we think science and spirituality are different, right? Because in order to harness transmedium or anti-gravity technology, that's harnessing the ether. That's harnessing the things that are in between the things that that we can't see, right? We just talked about the fact we can't see 99% of what's going on around us. And in order to grasp that, it's almost a spiritual aspect to it. It's like you need to understand that there is things between things that hold everything together, which is the ether, or, whichever way you want to describe that. And once we start harnessing that, I don't know, like we can start skipping across the cosmos, which I think was what Eric Weinstein was trying to get to in a scientific way, trying to use physics to describe that. You know what I mean?
And look at the recent publication that came out that physicists use quantum mechanics to pull energy out of nothing. So
yes,
there is now
which is Tesla tech. That's Tesla tech. That's Otis Carr. That's all that.
Yeah, and more and more of this stuff is being scientifically explored, investigated, and that's just my wish that more academia and more members of the scientific community took this topic seriously and gave it the scrutiny and respect that it deserves, like the Galileo Project, like the folks at Enigma Labs, who are allowing everyday folks to report anonymously if they so desire, so that we can develop this. They develop a huge database, and then you have advocacy groups like the good work of Ryan Graves. He's just founded a new nonprofit, Americans for a Safer Aerospace, to kind of address a lot of the safety of flight issues. And if we get more members of the scientific and academic community to take this topic seriously, I think we would know a lot more than we currently do today if they just push the ego aside and said, F you stigma, and just follow the facts and data wherever it leads, and not be worried about their PhD or their funding. But that's a sad reality for a lot of folks that are in the academic and scientific community.
It is, isn't it? I mean, and I think all of us now, well, I think podcasting, these platforms that we all operate on, it's widened the gaze of a lot of people. And, we've sat here and haven't really tried, and we're 2 hours in, boys, right? And we've really only scratched the surface on a few different things that we could explore again and again. And the internet's basically shown us that we're all the same anyway, okay? My little indie podcast is listened to all over the planet, literally, right? There's not a country, I'm pretty sure, that we haven't been listened to. And, so that tells me that, sort of scares me that that's how many people have listened to my voice. However, at the same time, what it does show is that the variation and the understanding that we're all the same. You know what I mean? We're all interested in this same thing. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are. And I think as a collective, there's a fair percentage of us now that would be totally open to, as I say, getting over ourselves and collaborating, right? Let's come together. Let's whatever we can contribute. Let's move the collective forward, right? I mean, I know some of the people were talking about the one world government and all that sort of stuff, and unfortunately, that could be a side of the narrative that's in play. But I would look, maybe it's a pipe dream, but I'd still like to think that love is the answer, and maybe we can get together and share, and move the world forward, as opposed to having these control structures in place that.
Completely agree. Totally agree. Yep. I mean, there's always going to be your doomsday preppers, even, if there is, if a disclosure event happens, or if there is a disclosure announcement, you'll always have the doomsday preppers and folks that, question their whole being. But then you'll have folks that just get up and go to work, do their 9 to 5, because there are more important things to them than, the thought of an extraterrestrial intelligence out there. But then you have the folks like us that are very passionate about this topic, and we just want transparency and to know what is fact and what is fiction. So I think we live in an incredibly exciting. I think it's the most exciting time to be alive, because the pace, the speed that information can be disseminated now. I mean, who writes letters to one another these days? I mean, snail mail is a thing of the past. Everything is done digitally, electronically. You have, business happens at the speed of a tweet. everything happens at the speed of information. So we live in we're so privileged to live in this age, and that's why I'm excited to come on to shows like yours and have these conversations and do research topics that we find fascinating investigating, because it is we all have a curiosity about the unknown. We want to answer those three big questions. Are we alone in the universe? Is there a God? And what happens when you die? And there's many other questions that folks have, but they're, I guess, the big three ones that have sat with us as a species for so long. But I had a question for you, Triffon. Actually, I was interested to get your thoughts on. Do you follow the guys at Uncharted X?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on their research on the pre-dynastic ancient Egyptian granite vase? I know they're doing.
Well, this is the out of place technology that we're starting to discuss, that we're starting to see. Okay, so yeah, Ben from Uncharted X, he's an Aussie guy. His sticker's actually on the studio door here, and yeah, he has. So from a private collection, he's got a vase analysed by basically aviation engineers, and they're using the most up to date modern technology to measure how these vases were made. And like I said, it goes back to this out of place technology. So the vase isn't out of place technology, but how did they make a vase out of rose granite? Okay. And we're talking about tolerances to 7/1000ths of an inch off being perfect and 10/1000ths of an inch off being perfect in a vase, right? Of which there is hundreds of examples around the world. So this was something that they could do easily, right? These are granite vases that are made perfectly. There's all sorts of stuff like this, and again, this is part of a larger presentation that I want to have a bit more of a deeper look at. But that's where the evidence is, right? And I remember years ago they had an Egyptian thing come to Brisbane, and we went and saw it. Me and the missus escaped the fairies and went and saw the Egyptian exhibit. And there was like a whole cabinet of like a brush and a this and a that, and they were all so elegantly made and also beautifully made. And it dawned on me, like, these are everyday common objects that we buy down at Woolworths. Okay, it's not like there was just one of these things made. They had the ability to mass manufacture some of the common, and these are like beautiful golden brushes and hair things and makeup and all this sort of stuff. And it was all beautifully made in these little containers and tins. It's like, what we need to do is like, yes, the pyramid's amazing. There's megaliths are amazing, all this sort of stuff, right? So it's like, okay, with the vase, let's talk about the vase for a second. So, okay, what's the machine that built the vase? Number one, how could you just manipulate rose granite, which is, I think, is in the top part of the hardness scale as far as rocks are concerned, but it's also brittle as well because it's got crystalline structures in it, and if you hit a crystalline structure wrong, it just cracks and messes the whole thing up, right? So, okay, what machine made the vase? That machine was obviously able to make those vases at will, it seems, right? But then what's the machine that made the machine, right? Because the machine that made the machine had to be more accurate than the machine that makes the vase, okay? And then you got to expand out what level of understanding do you have of generic, if your technology has got to the generic state where you're making vases with it, where else is it going? What else is it doing? That's why building a pyramid with 6.3 million stones, that it's, and all the alignments that come with that and the different numbers, you've got to suspend your disbelief. I mean, you can even talk about, like somewhere like Göbekli Tepe, which is the oldest man-made astrological observatory. In order to make Göbekli Tepe, not only did you have to manipulate stone, you had to know where northeast south was, you had to know geology, you had to know, physics, you had to know mathematics, you had to know, logistics. Like, it just never ever, a 5-axis mill. That's what, so basically what the Uncharted X boys are saying is that the only thing that comes close now is a proper 5-axis CNC machine. Wow, right? Yeah. That's the only thing. But even then, there's been other guys that operate CNC machines that have reviewed the Uncharted X work, and basically they've said this would be hard to do in acrylic, right? So just to do it in plastic, to have the exact same dimensions.
Let alone in rose granite, yeah, right.
Yeah, let alone in rose granite, or, but you got to remember too that this the story goes out of Egypt that it was done with copper chisels, man. You know what I mean? And diorite balls and all this. Just it's just ridiculous. But it does feed into a lot of what we were talking about earlier. Whereas there's this stigmatism, or there's the old guard, right? We know where everybody's waiting for this next generation to die off so we can move the conversation forward. And I think that's the
threatens the reputation of the classic archaeologist who's come up through the traditional way of thinking and study, and it threatens their paradigm, doesn't it? So they just push it to the side. It's fascinating. I only recently read about that in
look, they're doing some very, very valuable work. I mean, I think Ben made his money in technology or something, and now he's just been dedicating his life to this advanced ancient civilization mystery, and he does valuable work. I mean, you boys actually would be very interested in the Brothers of the Serpent. They have a UFO series. Like, it's buckle in, because it's like 10 episodes, I think, that this Marty Garza has done. And I'd love to get your viewpoint on some of those ones as well. Brothers of the Serpent, the UFO episodes are very, very interesting.
Pop me a link if you've got one.
I will, man. I will. I'll send it to you via Twitter for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, and again, so does the ancient advanced tech that was made in Egypt, who knows how many thousands of years ago, the pyramids, the megaliths, the fact that LIDAR, they keep scanning LIDAR in South America, they keep finding citadels and highways. And like, I think the latest estimate is that the amount of people that existed in South America was over 150 million people once existed in South America. Like, the Amazon jungle is a planted jungle. Okay, that was a lot of that jungle was done on purpose. They've actually now know, because there's different sections of jungle that have different things, and there's evidence of agriculture. It's basically the Amazon basin, whatever happened to the Mayans and the people that existed in that continent. When they left, the Amazon just got out of control, basically. But from what they understand, that a lot of that basin is actually planted.
Right.
And it's
makes you wonder. Makes you wonder. Is this technology that's just been lost to time and the ages, or is it? And how many resets have there been over the millennia of human species that have gotten to a level of advancement, and then through some form of cataclysm, the restart the clock, and you start all over again. So
I think a lot. I mean, even in there's like a 16. I'm trying to think. Which it's either 400 or 1600 years, the Dark Ages, right? The Dark Ages, I think, is 400 years. And the reality is we've got no idea what happened in the Dark Ages. They were medieval, and, horses and, whatever else, right? The reality is we don't, okay? You want to look into something pretty interesting, is the melted castles of Scotland, okay? There's these castles in Scotland and across Europe, actually, that look like the stone on the front of them has been melted, right? And look, that legitimately, was that a dragon? Okay. It's, thanks, Angus. Yeah, the Amazon is planted because of the high concentration of food species of trees, right? So there's so much food in the Amazon, and it's actually sectioned out. Right, so the bananas are over here, this is over here, that's over there, and it's obviously crisscrossed. But if you look at it from a downward, there's food everywhere, which shouldn't be there technically, without people planting it there.
So it really throws out the concept of ultra terrestrials not being out of perspective on history.
I don't think they are at all. I don't think they are at all, boys. Yeah, I don't think they are at all. Right, here's my theory. I'd like to hear your theory on it, right? But my theory on the ultra terrestrial thing. So, like you boys just said, how many cataclysms has there been, right? So let's pretend for a second that, so theoretically 70,000 years ago, the reset button was hit in a big, big way, and all of us stem from 10,000, 8,000, 10,000 people, okay, globally. So let's pretend from 70,000, let's go back, maybe they had a 100,000 year run, or even 70,000 to 12,800 years, right? There's a 50,000 year run where no major cataclysm happens. Now, we went from horseback to rocket ships in 200 years, boys, right? So, what could we do across 50,000 years if we don't blow ourselves up? So let's pretend for a second that there is an advanced race of ultra terrestrials. Okay, pick whatever flavor floats your boat. Okay, however, if they had existed on this planet for, let's say, millions of years, okay, because we're talking craziness here now, okay, but let's say they existed for millions of years, how many cataclysms are you going to observe as a species before you figure out that maybe under the water is a better idea, right? Because you can fire a 50 cal shell into the water and within 3 foot it's stopped dead, right? That movie thing where the bullets are flying through the water, that's not true at all, right? You can fire a 50 cal sniper rifle shell into a pool. The Mythbusters did it, right, to see what it was, and within 3 foot it had stopped, right? So where's the most stable place? If you could develop transmedium technology, right, and if you could suck oxygen out of the ocean, which it does have, right, if you needed oxygen, maybe they live under the water, man. Maybe there is ultra terrestrials under the water. Okay, there's a number of persistent myths that echo across the globe, and one of them is an underwater people, or an under the people, the ant people from under the planet, right? That's
it kind of reminds me of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. You've got the Eloi and the Morlocks. It's not what is it?
But then
art imitating life, or life imitating art.
But then you take into account that so basically LiDAR technology is accelerating, and they're penetrating more depths of the planet with these LiDAR technologies, and apparently they've now found oceans underneath the planet, right? They've found voids, massive voids underneath our feet. There's this cave in Vietnam, another one of those classic stories where someone's standing on the valley on one side and they look across the valley and they see a cave, and old mate goes over there to explore it, and it's one of the largest cave complexes the world's ever known. It's got its own ecosystem, it's got its own atmosphere, plants grow in there, sun gets in there, and like something could have been hiding in there for who knows how long, right? The pterosaur stuff, like the flying dragons, right? There is stories of pterosaurs coming out of places like Papua New Guinea and Northern Europe and stuff like that into the 20th century, boys, right? And, if a dinosaur that can fly, even if there is a cataclysm, you just fly away, you know what I mean? You'll find a spot potentially, and maybe, who knows, right? I think one of the problems we have at the moment is that because of what's happened over the last few years, our trust in everything is gone. Basically, any sort of institution, we're not going to trust anything they say, really. Now, that can be scary, where that means nothing is real, or it means everything is possible, which is much more exciting and much more fun to talk about. I'd love that, and I'm going to throw this at Anthony, then Grant. Dark Side of the Moon, Black Knight satellite. Anthony first.
Well, there's a lot of theories of the Black Knight satellite. There could possibly have been a bit of space.
Ancient tech.
Oh, well, I don't know. It's because not enough. There's not enough evidence on it, because there's only been a couple of captures of it, and that's about as far as
need more data.
Yeah,
the data. You need it. There's a lot of claims, and that's all it is. It's just claims and theories and the whole thing. And I don't want to go and speculate too much on it, but okay, yeah, it's misshapen. It could have been like a parachute from an old bit of space tech that's been thrown up there and it's just been stuck in space all this time, Or it could have been it's one of our little moons that we don't even know that's really existing. But, the satellite technology that we have, we could pick up a Muamua in its weird-ass shape, for all that's miles away.
Yeah.
And yet we can't pick up this Black Knight thing. So, why can't we figure out what this Black Knight satellite is? Obviously, funding is a thing, but if it's something that's of concern in our space, then there should be that.
And what do you think about some of because there's some real fascinating footage that's come off the moon through super awesome telescopes of, things coming from the dark side of the moon and stuff like that. There's some interesting stuff there.
I think a lot of it's CGI.
You think a lot of it's CGI?
I do. There's, if you're talking about like those things that come across and you can see the shadow on the moon, it's like, no, mate, you can't see that sort of thing from Earth, and
Yeah.
you look at the perspectives here. Like this thing, the moon's like what? How many 100,000 kilometers away or whatever? It takes us like what 2 or 3 days to get there, and from my understanding, the moon is about the size of Australia in size perspectives.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it from our perspective with a telescope and being able to see these spaceships flying. They're like the size of those spaceships has to be phenomenal to even be casting a shadow on that moon from our
Yeah,
perspective.
I agree. I agree.
So
I mean,
it's all CGI. It's all CGI.
It's gotta be. It's as convincing as it is. Like they're done well. I'll give them that. If it is real, then I don't know. I'll leave it up to everyone else's opinions on that one.
Well, look, it is fascinating that we haven't been back to the moon since
the moon's interesting,
the
man.
1970s. So it'll be certainly interesting to see what comes of these Artemis missions, and then using the moon as a
springboard.
as a springboard to get to Mars. So again, exciting time to be alive. Like,
so what do you reckon? What do you reckon about the thing is with you, Grant? When are you going to run for Parliament, mate? Because you are so slippery when I ask you a question.
I sit on the fence a lot of the time.
I know you do, man. You're like a perennial fence. It's
again,
good fun to try
and let the data lead me. No, but I mean, black satellite I find fascinating, but I kind of tend to agree with Anthony that if there was something to it, with all of the technology that we've got that's Earth-based that can look up and get high quality, high fidelity resolution imagery, we if there was something to it, I don't think that could be kept a secret. I think there would be, we would know more about that if there was something to it. So, I mean, it's a fun what if to kind of talk about, but I don't think there's anything to it. What I do find interesting though is Angus made a comment. He said, "Let's not forget mammals took 65 million years to get to humans. Dinosaurs existed for 130 million years. Did they become interplanetary?" So, Angus, you might be interested to learn that I had a chat with a gentleman by the name of Brad Voorhees, who does a great podcast called the Sonic Gravity Podcast, and he is postulated, well, what happened to the most intelligent species of dinosaur was not it was a breed of velociraptors called the Troodon, which had an opposable thumb. What would happen if that was that dinosaur was the top of the food chain and was able to evolve for how many millions of years over time? What would that potentially look like with the evolution of dinosaurs if they weren't taken out by an asteroid, or so we think?
Yes.
So, or either Angus has been watching too much Rick and Morty.
And there's that very, very cool new movie coming out that's called, I think it's called 65, where future humans land on prehistoric Earth. So that'll be a good popcorn movie, I think.
Yeah, right. Well, boys, we might begin to wrap it up. We went 2 hours plus. I think we've covered an amazing amount of topics. I was thinking about the moon and what you boys look. The moon. I think the moon's parked there, but that's a different. I don't know whether we want to have that conversation now. It doesn't make sense for it to be as perfect as it is. I think the moon is parked there, but I don't know whether you want to talk about that or maybe because we keep covering topics and we don't have anything next time.
We're going to keep going on. I told you we're doing it all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. We're just going to see how we break the record.
Did you enjoy Moonfall, the movie Moonfall? In that case, that was.
I didn't see that one when it came out.
You probably enjoy that one.
That was Halle Berry. Was that the Halle Berry one?
Yeah, with who else was in it? I can't remember his name, but that the moon is some form of alien technology.
Yeah. Look, we did a myself and Loomis, he's another good bloke, Chan It Down podcast out of Hawaii. We did a moon episode late last year, I think, where we just sort of went all through the different possibilities, and the moon fascinates me. It's one of those ones that there's more questions than answers, right? The size of it, its composition, the fact that, you know what I mean, the fact that it matches the sun and the earth, and blah 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 blah, right? There's more questions than answers, right? With that topic. But boys, I tell you what, how about we do? Look, this conversation was excellent. It was everything I thought it would be. I love the three-way. There you go, Anthony. You got your three-way.
You did it. Thank you.
But I love the banter between us all and the different perspectives, boys. I think, with this topic continuing to advance, we need to make sure that we come together on a semi-regular basis this year if we can make it happen, I reckon, because there's always different things to talk about. So, final word, boys. So you'll go Anthony first and then Grant, and maybe we wrap it up for the evening.
Look, where to go? Look, obviously, there's so much to take in. Like, obviously, it comes down to everyone's personal opinions, really, on the whole topic, where you want to go with it, how you want to take it. Biggest thing for me is obviously, like, as we keep mentioning, keep objective, keep questioning everything. Even if you think what you see could be possible UAP, still question it. It's probably likely to be something that you don't understand, but you're just taking it from a different perspective or something. And that's my biggest thing. I try and push the point very strongly on being objective on everything and trying to be critical on what you're trying to assess and what you've seen. And I just not to try and disrespect anyone in their encounters or their experiences and whatnot. I firmly believe whatever you have seen, if it's done something phenomenal, then by all means you have seen something of a unnatural nature on our own capabilities. So I might be very critical on the imagery and all sorts of stuff, only because I've had no evidence on my side of things to go and say otherwise that what you are seeing is genuine.
Look,
and,
man,
again, I'm not.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that what you got to understand, Anthony, is I think I've always thought you provide a very valuable service, mate. You know what I mean? You're providing a platform for people to share their stories objectively, and you're looking at them
100%.
objectively, right? And I think that's very important, right? And I think one of the things that excites me about this collaboration we've had tonight is that we're all very much on the same page, right? We're all we all have our own levels of skepticism. However, we're open to whatever discovery comes along.
And I just want people to understand, like, don't take us the wrong way when we're trying to be objective on things. There, we're not trying to question what you've seen. We're just trying to get a better understanding and try and get a bit of a better analysis on things to get an idea of the possibilities of what something can be. So that's my biggest thing, and it's what you got to do. And I want people to go and take that on board. Time, dates, all the data we'll keep mentioning. Time, dates, locations, as much detail as you can possibly give. That's where it all helps you. Even if you can provide a bit of imagery to go on it, even though it won't give you any more credibility, but the fact that if you can provide all that detail gives that much more credibility to your experience. That's all I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree, mate. I totally agree. What about you, Grant? What's the final thoughts?
I would totally agree with you. I think it's nice that we all, we all share a common bond through our passion and interest, and we all have our own unique areas that we're really interested in. I mean, I love that you, Anthony, you've developed such a great community of folks that feel comfortable enough and safety and strength in numbers where they can share their stories and their experiences. And it's all about breaking down the walls of stigma. And I think that's what you do really nicely with such a huge community that you have as part of your Facebook group, that people can share their stories and not feel like they're going to be ridiculed or ostracized for it. And it's perfectly acceptable and reasonable to have your experience or your photographic or visual evidence questioned, but have it be questioned in a respectful way. It's not about disbelief or you're full of shit or anything like that. It's all about, well, this is what I experienced. I can't question your experience to be true or not true because I didn't experience, but I can certainly question what you have, what information that you've been able to capture during experience. So I love that you have kind of that human element and the platform for capturing experiences and sightings, and Triffon, your interest in the whole unlocking the code and ancient civilization and technology aspect, and me coming from my approach of trying to engage and advocate for greater conversations to be had on this topic at the government level, so that there's a greater degree of transparency. I think we all add some value to, and that's why I really enjoyed this conversation tonight, because
it's great.
I've learned from both of you, because it's not my wheelhouse what you guys have a passion to explore and research, and we can all learn from each other and have these kind of great constructive conversations. So I really appreciate you having me on, because it's been a good learning experience for me too.
Absolutely. And look, Yeah, that's easy. I can't really sum it up any better than that, boys. I really appreciated it. It's everything I thought it would have been. And as I say, I think I have a feeling that this topic's going to move pretty quickly. So I think maybe we need to pencil one in once we find out more about the documentary, Grant, make sure you let us know, mate, and we'll come on and we'll discuss that. And, maybe we could have a viewing party. I don't know. We'll try and figure something out there, or you know what I mean.
I'd love to do a viewing party. Yeah, no, or happy to jump on with you guys whenever you're happy to have me come back. So I mean, always happy to share what findings I come up with, information that I'm able to disclose. So yeah, always look forward to having a chat.
Awesome, boys, and look, thanks everyone. I like doing these live ones. I think it's excellent that have the input from the listeners and the questions, and it keeps us moving and keeps us understanding. So thanks everyone who took the time to comment, and check out Grant's stuff. I think he's probably going to release this on his channel. I'm going to release it on mine, and Anthony's going to release it on his. And it's about that cross promotion and helping each other out and moving the conversation forward on all angles. So awesome, boys. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.